Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the Covering All Topics podcast with your host, yours truly, Bryce Rankowitz, and AJ the Cat Catanzaro.
Hola.
Hola. So our episode this week is sponsored by a few of our favorites. Rack Racing is one of our sponsors for this episode. Rack Racing, headed by Jay Kavanaugh, who we've had on the podcast, and we definitely encourage you to check out that episode, which was our last episode, episode 6. Rack Racing is all about random acts of kindness. It's a race team where Jay has mental coaching that he does with his group of riders, and all of the proceeds from that go directly to random act of kindness in the community, in the motocross community, in the local community. Like over the holidays, he had a campaign where he was out donating food to people in need. He was going door to door with hams, all kinds of different things. So any proceeds that his training programs generate go directly to random acts of kindness, and it's such a great thing for the community. It's a great thing for the sport, and it's a feel-good story for everybody. So go check them out. RAK, R-A-K, short for Random Act of Kindness, RAK-racing.com. Another one of our sponsors for this episode is the Collective Experience. Dave Drake's another one of our guests. Go check that episode out, episode 3. The Collective Experience is an internship-like experience, a VIP behind-the-scenes look and experience with Supercross riders that are relevant and involved in the sport today, right now. What it is, we've talked about it before, and you could go into detail. We went into detail with him on the episode. It's a VIP experience where the individuals can sign up and be a shadow to a professional Supercross rider. So it's an opportunity to get a foot in the door in the industry, to have an awesome experience behind the scenes in the pits. Oftentimes you're able to do track walk and do hands-on stuff with the bikes and with the riders and really become part of the program for a day. So we definitely recommend you check out them at thecollectivexp.com. And they're still taking the collectivexp.com, collectivexp.com. And they're taking applications for some current members to join for the rounds of Supercross for 2019. So AJ can go into that, but I think they have 8 or 9 so far, and you're looking for a few more. Is that right?
Yeah, we chose the first 8 rounds, and I believe, and I should know the answer to this, I think there's 17 rounds in the Supercross series. So whatever that leaves left, send in your resumes, send in your applications, and there's really nothing like this experience. If you want to get your foot in the door in the industry, this is certainly the way to do it.
Absolutely. So go check them out, thecollectivexp.com. And AJ, you're going to talk about our next sponsor, right? He has a special place in your heart.
Right. So our third sponsor for this podcast is On the Gas Motorsports. And On the Gas Motorsports is actually my sponsor for A1 for the first Supercross round. So an awesome company based out of California that's supporting my efforts for Anaheim for the first race. Check them out at onthegasmotorsports.com. You can get any type of accessory. I think right now they actually have a sale 10% off for building a wheel set. So if you need some wheels, go check them out. It's a good company that when I put up the post looking for title sponsors, it was one of the first companies to reach out. So definitely they're involved heavily in the industry. So support them, support the people that support us, right?
Absolutely. So we thank our sponsors for the support, and we thank all of you for the support, for listening to our episodes thus far. And we have a really exciting one for you this week that AJ and I have both been looking forward to. Our guest this week for episode 7 is a guy by the name of Ramsey Ayachi. And Ramsey Ayachi is a board-certified hypnotist and a master of neuro-linguistic programming. And we'll talk about the difference between those two and what they are and in the episode. But, man, what a really cool guy. He was a Marine helicopter pilot and has
Awesome.
a illustrious career in the United States military, for which we thank him for his service. Did 20 years as both a pilot and then a flight instructor, team leader, just a really, really illustrious career in the military. So he went from that to hypnotism, and he'll explain how he got into that in the episode. But man, what a cool guy! Super nice, uh, super knowledgeable, and it really ties into our last episode with the mental strength, the mental game, the mental side of fitness and life. And it was a great conversation.
Super smart guy, and I've known Ramsey for almost a year exactly. And when Supercross started, and we'll talk about this when the episode starts, but I started seeing him consistently and just having a conversation with him. Obviously, it being hypnotism being his job, he's definitely, he knows how to speak, and something about his voice alone is soothing to me. Like, I think it's because I had so many sessions with him. So it was a pleasure to talk to him, and hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, I think he'll be a frequent guest because we just really scratched the surface. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you and I talked after the recording. It's like, man, every question we asked led to other questions. We wanted to keep diving deeper and deeper. And unfortunately, being that we all have busy schedules, we only had a certain amount of time where we were able to talk to him. So we squeezed as much in as we could, and I think we got a lot of content out of it. But there's definitely way more. I mean, I think at one point he said he does classes that are 8 hours a day for a week. And there's still more there. So
There's so much.
yeah, absolutely. So we really hope you enjoy this one. And without further ado, we'll get right into it. Please welcome Ramsey Ayachi. Well, welcome, Ramsey. We again really appreciate you doing this for us. And AJ and I have been excited to have you on since we basically started this. So we thank you very much.
Oh man, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for inviting, and it's really good to reconnect with AJ. I've been following him, and ever since we met, and so the honor is mine.
Well, thank you. So, did AJ tell you the story of kind of how the universe converged on him reaching out to you?
He did briefly. It is a good story though, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, so it's such a weird thing. I mean, AJ and I talk about this philosophy a lot. Is how many things have to be coincidence before it's not a coincidence anymore. And so last year, AJ had been struggling a little bit with the mental game and kind of focusing, and a plethora of other mental issues that were preventing him from what we thought was reaching his max potential. And my mom, so I grew up around the corner from a pretty renowned hypnotist, and I'm not sure if you know him. His name is Dan LaRosa. And so my mom has some experience with getting pain relief through hypnotism from him, and some other mental strategies with coping. And I had dawned on me at one point. I was like, AJ, why don't you reach out to a hypnotist? It might kind of help you further that mental game and kind of get you in like a different mindset. And he said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. But then what happened after that, AJ?
And I just remembered now as you brought this up that you were the one who kind of sparked that idea in my head. So that's funny that all three of us are on the phone now. Yeah, I think it was it right after A1? I think I had my first race of the season last year. And we had a conversation. My whole mantra last year was like all in mentality. Like I was doing everything I could to try to do things right and to just fully commit for, once in my life, where I felt like I was one footed and one foot out a lot. And you brought it up, and normally I would probably be like, yeah, it's a good idea, but I wouldn't pull the trigger on it. And I'm pretty sure when you mentioned it, I went on my computer or on my phone and did a Google search, and one of the first names that popped up was Ramsey's. Or there was a couple others. There's Ramsey's and a few others, and I just quickly read your bio, Ramsey. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like being a Marine, and kind of, I was just like, all right, this this could be a good match. And I think we set something up, and then we clicked right away. And
AJ, I think you missed the point of where I was going with that. Didn't your dad, like right after I told you, like completely unrelated, your dad said something the next day?
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's where I was going with that.
Well, literally, I mean, I have such a bad memory. You're going to have to keep reminding me of everything. But either that day or the day after. But then where I was going with that is I went in to see Ramsey, and we had our first session. And in the back of my head going into this, I'm like, this is awesome. Even after the first session or towards the end of it, I'm like, this is amazing. I want to keep going. But of course, the first thing my mind went to was how am I going to afford to do this with my racing season? And Ramsey kind of sat me down at the end of the session, and you said you wanted to do everything pro bono for the season because you felt like we clicked, and you're very interested in working with a supercross guy. And I'm like, what are the chances of all of that kind of coming together? Right? And I'm like, all right. And at that point, it gave me even more confidence that I should be working with you. I'm like, this is exactly
so cool.
where I should be, right?
Yeah, it was so crazy. It's funny. Just a little sidebar. I don't even know if I told you about this. So growing up down the street, my neighbors, two brothers, and one of them had a XR80. This is like 1980s where things didn't even look like they had suspension on them.
Mm-hmm.
He had a Honda XR80, and his little brother had one of those 50s. And they were constantly, jumping all over the place. And in our town, there was a Honda dealership. And I used to look at the bikes in the window and go, man, one of these days I'm going to ride one of those things. And it would go on and on and on. I asked my mom. She was like, no, you're not going to get one of those. In addition to like Sega and Atari and all those other things, she just like put the kibosh on. And then, I had gotten dirt bikes as an adult when I was over in California. A lot of good riding out there when I was active duty. And one of my best friends got me into it. And then here you come out of nowhere and you're like, hey, I'm interested in hypnosis services. And I'm like, what? You got to be kidding me. And I'd always wanted to.
Perfect.
Yeah, always wanted to work with someone who's in that line of, that's the calling. That's like a dream come true. And so I was like, of course, like, let's do this. Let's get started now. So,
yeah, and I'm sure you recognize like that's this sport, maybe above all others, is there's such a huge mental component.
Oh my gosh, totally.
And the more we spoke, the more we uncovered, and the more I realized just the amount of variables. Every week I would come back to you, and I think we kept consistent until the end of the season. So you figure 15, 16, 17 sessions worth. And we uncovered different things every single weekend, which seems exhausting. And it was a lot of work, and it continues to be a lot of work for me to stay consistent with all of the things we worked on. But it really made me realize the importance of it all. As a top athlete, like there's such little separating us. Why wouldn't we practice the mental side of things? If we practice riding the dirt bike every day and we go to the gym and work out and we're on the bicycle, getting our cardio better and better, why aren't we working on the mental side? It just seems to be overlooked by so many people. And I know I sound like a broken record saying that, Bryce, but it's very true.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. I was actually just working with someone before this call, and in our culture, there's a lot of acceptance. There's a lot of social norm and acceptance of, you want to look good. You exercise. You want to look good, or you want to have, be physically fit. You gotta, eat, have a fueling program, or eat food that's going to be healthy and accomplishes that goal. But for the mental health side, or with the performance mindset side, we kind of expect that we do something one time and then it's good to go for, eternity. And that's just your mind is in many cases more important, if not equally important, to the other part of it. And once that part gets straight, the rest of it will just kind of, fall into position very nicely.
So
Right.
Ramsey, before we put the cart before the horse, let's back up because you have a very impressive resume, and I don't want to overlook it. And so we'll talk about how you got into hypnotism and everything, but you want to kind of give us a rundown of your career, where you started. AJ had mentioned you were in the Marines, and it looks like you had a pretty cool assignment in the Marines. So why don't you walk us through that, how you came to be in the hypnotism realm in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share this because what I experience is what I think a lot of people experience. Not just the military part, but just experiencing challenges, adversity, and giving it meaning that it was holding me back. And so, from that context, um, grew up in South Texas. Went to the East Coast to go to school. Got commissioned in the Marine Corps, and I joined as a pilot. Went to flight school and deployed pretty soon after the first Gulf War. Pretty soon after that, deployed overseas, and we were doing pretty routine operations to support Kuwait. Came back, went back out a second time, then a third time to Afghanistan, switched jobs in the Marine Corps. And so instead of flying the CH-53, which is the massive helicopter that I flew, I became a flight instructor. And so I was an instructor in the squadron, and then I became a flight instructor to teach people who are joining the military how to fly, and had a ton of fun doing that. And didn't realize at the time, but every time we fly, we are practicing, or when we're in flight, especially when we're in flight school, we're practicing a lot of these techniques that I now know the systematic process for how to do it. Before, I just kind of did stuff, and I was, approaching things from a willpower and I'm going to overcome this adversity kind of perspective in a clumsy way. But you have to do that when you're flying a mission. You have to be able to shut down engines, put fires out, direct traffic. You got to do all that stuff and be able to have your mind separate where it can operate at 2 to 3 steps ahead of you, doing it while your aircraft's moving, but also be in a place where, in case there's an emergency, that you don't get bogged down and you can stay focused. So you're drilling this stuff into your nervous system so that you can respond without even thinking about it. And that's essentially what I had been doing, but didn't give it all these terminologies and processes and stuff like that. So after that, I went to another assignment, and I taught people how to run close air support missions. So somebody who has a plane that's got a bomb strapped to it, I could take that bomb and drop it on a target in coordination with the infantry that I was working with. And so that was another experience of not only teaching people, but doing something that you had to think fast and think quickly and think ahead many steps and have it inside your nervous system so that when you're speaking, you're not even thinking about it. It's inside your behavior. And then from there, my last tour was here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I finished up on the board that reviews people's discharges. That was a lot of fun. I got a chance to really empathize with people, like learn about them, their story, why did they get discharged in those specific conditions. And then I retired. And here's the kicker. At the retirement, I'm sitting there, and I'm in the years leading up, I'm sitting there going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I had served 20 years in the Marine Corps. And I'm sitting there and I'm realizing that I wasn't happy. Like something was not sitting right. And this is how people typically experience it. They're not happy. Something's not feeling right, but they can't put their finger on it. And what I just soon discovered was that I didn't want to, I had the opportunity to do something different. Number one, I survived being in the Marine Corps for that long. Number two, yeah. I made it to a place where I didn't have to sweat not having an income. I didn't have to stress about it as much as having zero income, because I was going to be drawing a retirement. And what I noticed was that I was still fearful, and I still had a lot of fear about, well, I need to know where my paycheck's coming from. I need to have all the information. I need to, the list goes on and on and on and on. The stories we tell ourselves are pretty ridiculous when you think about them. But I was telling myself that story.
Right.
I need
Basically
to
excuses.
Yeah, they're all my limiting beliefs. I need to have a job. If I don't have a job, it doesn't matter if I'm happy or not. I just need to have a job. And I really started to question, like, what am I here to do? Like, what's the purpose of this? It sounds really cliche when you think about it, because a lot of people summarize their experience in these very concise words. But I was questioning what am I doing here, and how am I making life better for myself and for people around me? And so I had that incongruency inside of me, and I kept thinking, let's do this. And my wife she's a Marine also, and she's like, let's start this business. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Starting a business is the scariest thing on earth. And she would go, shut up and let's do it. And so I kept going back to, well, if I just go submit my resume, I can, work for the federal government. If I submit my resume, I can go do this other thing. And inside of me, it wasn't like helping other people. And I knew inside my soul that I needed to do something where I was helping other people achieve their best. And I cascaded through all these thoughts of being a teacher, being a, like some kind of counselor or something like that. None of them were appealing because they didn't quite fall into that notch. And I was still afraid. Where am I going to get my money from? That's all fear. And finally, my wife goes, you know what? I want you to go visit this person and have them help you. And this person she's a hypnotist and a Reiki practitioner, real good friend of ours. And I visited her. And in that moment, in that experience with her, I discovered what my fears were. And I discovered that I was holding myself back because I was blaming. And it's easier to blame other people. It's easier to shift the blame external than it is to get busy doing the work you need to do on yourself. And I had been blaming my grandfather was like super influential in my life, like total. He's one of those guys that if you made a 99 in physics, he would go, "Where's that 1 point? How come you didn't get 100?" And I had taken that experience, and the meaning I had given it was that I was not good enough, that I wasn't gonna succeed, or I wasn't going to do whatever. I wasn't going to be successful if I tried something new out of the box. And so in that session with that provider, the hypnosis provider, I discovered that about myself. I cleaned it up to the point where I took any of the limiting energy away from it. And it was in that moment that I was able to take the step. And that's really, as we kind of evolve into this conversation, you want to take energy off of the meaning you give stuff so that you can get into action. And once you get into action with stuff, you can then kick that door down. And once you kick that door down once, it becomes a habit for you. And then you want to reinforce it. So I took that energy away, took the step forward, and that was 2012. And here we are going on 7 years later, being able to help people really make some pretty amazing breakthroughs in their own life. So that's how I got into it. And here's another story. That was hypnosis, and I got into the other skill set we use is neuro-linguistic programming. And that's something that, I was able to help AJ with quite a bit. And neuro-linguistic programming is, we define it as the systematic study of human performance. And so it's systematized, and because it's systematized and there's patterns, you can chunk it down into the patterns. And then if there's a piece of it, kind of like a Mr. Potato Head, if there's a piece of it that's not working, you can insert a new pattern into that blockchain piece of it, and then put it back together again, and then run that new program, and you get a different response. I had a fear of heights. And most people, when they say, "You're a pilot and you had a fear of heights," and I go, "Yep." And I had fear of heights of spindly, tall things, cathedrals, and, standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. And it was actually through the experience of NLP that I was able to take the energy away from my fear of heights. And now I go on trips with my family, and I don't like stand in the back or shy away from moving to the edge of stuff or standing there with my kids or experiencing with them.
Now, is that where we would practice, where you actually make the physiological change as well. Like you do something like whether it's a power move or whatever, and you kind of have those steps and it brings you to.
Yes, exactly. You change your state. You change what your body's perceiving and become the version that is required in that moment. That's exactly correct.
Now,
So
when you were, go ahead, Bryce.
No, well, I want to break it down for everybody who's listening, because everybody's familiar at least with what hypnosis on the surface is, but I kind of want to dig below that and get a better understanding from Ramsey on what actually hypnosis is, how it works, and maybe what the difference between the NLP and hypnosis is, and how they can work in conjunction with one another. So, if you were to break it down in the simplest form, what is hypnotism?
So, the best way to describe it is hypnotism it's the process of allowing someone, the client or whoever's the person that's experiencing it, to do two things. One is to still their mind. And when I say still their mind, let me use the metaphor of a timeline. And on the timeline, you got the past events that have happened in life, you got the future events that are going to happen, and you have the present moment. Our bodies are in the present moment, right? Many of us, even though our body's in the present moment, our mind is somewhere in the future or somewhere in the past. And normally, and you see this in our culture because there's a lot of, in the news, there's sensationalized news because it sells. People focus on it. It's actually in your million-year-old brain to focus on fear. Because what it does is it allows you to stay alive, keeps you surviving. So when you still your mind can get lined up with in the physical body. It comes out of the future and out of the past and hooks up where you can actually do something and commit focus entirely through your body, through how you perceive information, your senses, your sight, sound, taste, smell, and the feeling. And in hypnosis, I would describe hypnosis as more of a art. And it's a way of helping someone to still their mind where they don't have a bunch of negative monkey brain chatter. And in that moment, we create a scenario for the client. And the scenario is always done where they have a choice to go and feel resourceful and confident and content and happy, or they have a choice to feel sad and angry and frustrated and keep going down the old path or fearful. In that state, if the mind is healthy, and again, we're not mental health providers, so we don't work with people that have severe mental health issues. But in the majority of people that are walking around on Earth, when their mind is still and they are provided an option to go and continue with unresourceful behavior or to create the version of themselves that's going to be, experiencing life at its fullest, there's not a person on Earth that's going to choose the bad stuff. They'll always choose the thing that feels good. And what's happening on a neuroscience level is that they're actually uncoupling old thought patterns and they're coupling new thought patterns. They're literally wiring different associations in their mind when your brain is in that state. And it's called the alpha or the theta brainwave state, because alpha is a little bit lighter state of hypnosis, theta is a little bit deeper. And these are all things that are, neuroscientists and neurologists know this stuff. So still mind, ability to choose, and in that moment, the client will choose a thing that they feel the strongest, they feel the happiest, they feel the most love and compassion. And it's done in a very artistic way where it's almost a story that's told. Because the other thing that's really helpful with hypnosis is that we learn as humans, we learn best when we're not aware that we're learning. So if I deliver information in a story or in a metaphor of some sort, while I'm speaking, the person is listening and they're in total trance, but they're taking the story and they're applying the story to their own life. And they're starting to go through and make these new neural pathway connections. And in the brain, when you make a stronger connection that it gives you a sense of fulfillment, the old belief systems, they literally, like little pruning type of machines, they start to atrophy and they start to prune themselves because they don't have energy or electricity behind them anymore. So the old negative way of thinking begins to recede towards the back. The new version begins to take front and center. And the other thing that's really important about hypnosis is that with the still mind and given that option for good or bad, we learn best when we don't know we were learning. And the other key component is that we can't surprise ourselves. This is why the profession's really taking off now. It's because no one can surprise themselves. So for you to change something about yourself, that's a limiting belief, like what I was describing earlier, my fear of failure or my fear of I'm not good enough. I can't change that on myself. I need somebody's help because I have already heard myself say in the past, you shouldn't feel that way. Or maybe you could feel something different or some variation of it. And so I already know what I'm going to say to myself, and there's no emotion or emotional consequence that's attached to it. So it's basically words, rational thought, logical thought. There's no emotional consequence attached to it. And as a result, there will be no change. In hypnosis, we drive the scenario to the point where there's emotional consequence of either pain or pleasure attached to it. And that's why the transformation occurs. And that's where the new light up of the neural pathways begin. So that's hypnosis. In NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming, I think I had defined it earlier. It's the systematic study of human performance. And if you viewed your body as an antenna, you take in information through your eyes, through your ears, through the sense of touch and feeling. You take it in through the sense of smell and also the sense of taste. And so all of that information is coming in and it's giving us data. And the data is really, that's all it is, neutral. All the data is neutral. What we do as humans is we give that data meaning. And we do it through our experiences in life, whether, our parents said we weren't good enough, or, we got beat up by some junior high friends and they told us that our hair looked, whatever. So those kind of events have emotional consequence, and how you perceive the data is how your body responds to it. So in NLP, this data and the interpretation has structure to it. It's almost like if you were in the English class and you were learning grammar and composition, there's structure and patterns inside how we interpret data. And what we do when we use NLP is we see the patterns, and then we just kind of do like I was describing earlier, the Mr. Potato Head. If this feeling is a feeling that is unresourceful, and I want to give you a color to assign to this feeling, and let's say the person's color. Do you remember one of these exercises? Maybe it was something that we did together, AJ?
You might have to keep going for the memory to spark here. But
yeah,
real quick, before you continue, because a lot of our listeners are motocross people as well. So one of the first ones that comes to mind was me giving you the example of being at the stadium or even watching a race on TV would kind of like spike my heart rate a little bit, and my palms would start to sweat, and I'd get like this kind of nervous, crappy feeling.
Yes.
And then, so how would you? What would be your advice, I guess, to somebody to like what are the steps to changing that process?
Sure. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have a game plan on what you're going to focus on. And what we worked on when you were in the stadium, if I remember correctly, there was a focus on the I think we had talked something about the national anthem and how your mind wasn't even present for the national anthem, like you were there. And then I invited you to be fully present and to appreciate that moment. So to answer your question, you want to manage your state first, and that's what your body's perceiving. And the way that you do that is when you become aware that an unresourceful feeling, so the feeling of tension, sweaty palms, and stress is coming on. You want to initiate a new sequence in your mind, and you can do that easily by you can do something physical, like a lot of motocross riders do stuff, or athletes do something physical, like clapping their hands or slapping their legs. You do something physical, and you're basically interrupting the old pattern. And then you want to have a very defined game plan of what is it that you're going to focus on right in that moment, because the interruption creates a void in your mind, and in that void you can slip a new thing in very easily. So interruption, doing something physical, jumping up and down, like pounding on your legs or in your chest, and then focus on yourself, maybe holding or going through the final lap, or maybe coming over the finish line jump and doing it, and you're in first place, or being on the podium and doing an interview with one of the reporters talking about the race or something like that, where your focus goes to something visual, then it goes to something that you say to yourself verbally, or a message that you hear, like the sound of the fireworks going off or people congratulating you. And then you want to focus on the feeling. And you keep going around this process until you have that feeling that rises to the surface. And that's the feeling of confidence. Like if you focus on that scene of winning, the final jump, or how you're going to go through the whoop-de-doos, and you focus on that, it'll create this sensation in your body of confidence. You've seen yourself doing it the way that you want it to happen. It'll start to generate the feeling of confidence, because the thoughts are going to release those chemicals that reinforce that feeling. You just keep going around in a loop until you experience it in your body, and that's when you know that you got it. And one thing to note about this whole thing is most people, they'll get frustrated because they'll just focus on their success one time, and then they lose it. Like it flitters out, and the negative thought comes back in. They focus on it one time, lose it, and then they get frustrated. Now they're back in their negative loop. You want to just hold that focus and keep going around what you're saying to yourself, like I rock, or I forgot what you had a exercise that you did physically with your body and your trainer, and then you guys had a statement, and then you got on the bike. So it was hitting all three of your three main senses,
right,
and doing it over and over.
This adds another level to what we were talking to Jay Kavanaugh about when we had our mental game discussion with him, is that when you feel yourself, and we could apply this well outside of motocross also, is when you're feeling yourself in a dark area, or you're not in a good mental state, or you're feeling anxious, or you're not feeling right, actually present the physical manifestation of how you want to feel. So if you start getting an elevated heart rate, if you start feeling anxious, you get a queasy stomach, physically tell yourself, I'm going to feel happy, and put a smile on your face, and kind of, like you said, Ramsey, is interrupt that habit, for lack of a better word, and introduce a completely new mechanism whereby you can make yourself feel a different way, kind of steer your emotions where you want them to go.
Yeah, totally. And there's a little piece of secret sauce that's in there. If I looked at it from a process and or a math equation standpoint, so the clock starts and the negative thought enters. It's really important to know that the way your body experiences thoughts is through feeling. And every feeling you have is designed to reinforce what you're thinking about. So even people that say, well, I don't have any feelings, that would, a person, when they say that, really, they just haven't tuned themselves to be and have self-awareness. That's actually a seminar we're giving this weekend. Having self-awareness is a skill. And in many upbringings of people, they have that either beaten out of them, or they hear stuff like, stop crying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stuff like that, where it gets desensitized. So your thoughts are designed to create a chemical response in the body that is associated with a feeling. And the feeling is the memory of the thought. So the whole thing reinforces itself. So back to the stopwatch. Stopwatch goes, negative feeling happens. You must do something to interrupt the pattern. Otherwise, that pattern is going to keep running. And what I worked with AJ on is, how do you interrupt it? You can do it verbally. You can do it with your body. And then when you interrupt that pattern, you want to fire off the new pattern right on the heels of it, because there's a space that's inside your mind that's got a void, and it's just waiting to be filled. So
this is where the reset came in. Now, Ramsey, you're the one who taught me the reset, and I teach this to everybody. Like, I love it. This is probably the one thing that stuck with me the most.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's the reset is like, some of the language that I'll use is cancel. And I'll explain here in a second why it works. Cancel. Some clients are pretty funny, and they'll come up with stuff like hell no, or oh hell no, or something like that. Delete. One of my clients says delete 3 times. They do it in kind of like a high pitched voice. Delete, delete, delete. And what it does is, if you're having the negative thought and then you cancel it out, what ends up happening is that the human mind cannot focus on 2 things at the same time. It cannot have 2 primary focuses at the same time. It's not possible. Even people that say they multitask, that is not a primary thought when they're shifting from one to the next. They have to be on one thought, and then they have to move that primary focus to something else. The other things they drop in their level of focus. So you can look at ideas and thoughts entering your mind one at a time. So if you go from negative thought to canceling it out, for you to actually say cancel, you have to insert that thought into your mind. So now you just created an opening. When you create that opening, right on the heels of that, you launch the program that is, you like ripping it open, going over, doing what's that thing called when you scrub? Is it scrubbing? When you go right over the top? Yeah, you scrub over the hill. I love that stuff. It's so cool to see. You scrubbing over the top, or you're doing a look back and tearing off a sheet off your goggles, whatever it is, where you're just like taking it to another level. You see that, you say to yourself, some kind of phrase or mantra, and you just keep occupying that single thought, that single primary thought, over and over and over again, until that feeling becomes predominant in your body. And once you become aware of the feeling, now you know what it feels like and what's necessary to bring it back, and you can do it routinely. This is where people go off the rails, because they're like, well, it didn't happen. When I did it one time, it worked for once, and then it left. And I said, did you do it again? And they go, oh, no. And I said, well, you're just not used to it. Condition yourself for it. And then they do that, right, and they're like, holy crap, this is the best thing on earth.
AJ, I don't know if you realize this, but several years ago now, you actually taught me a tactic without actually knowing the psychology behind it. Is I think we were at Highland, and I was just like a little apprehensive, even though like skill wise I had the ability to do everything you were doing. I just like, it was in my own head about some of like the bigger features, which, I mean, for everybody listening, they're really big features, and we're not talking about little stuff here, right? Like, just to give myself a little credit here.
And this is not a mountain bike. Come on, I don't know if you said that yet. This is not a mountain bike.
Sorry, yeah, mountain bike.
But yes, there's some really big, scary stuff.
Yeah,
admittedly.
And so what you were telling me as I was following you is like, just don't think about it too much before you get into like whatever run in or you drop in anything. It's just like, before you do it, go 3, 2, 1. Do you remember telling me that?
No, I don't.
you'd say 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, whatever. And it would just kind of like completely reset my brain. And now having this discussion, I recall very specifically you telling me to do this. I remember where we were actually. You'd say 3, 2, 1 and just do it. And then I started applying that to like pretty much every hit that I would take on any media. So like mountain bike, dirt bike, ski jumps, anything that I would do that I would just kind of like get in my head and get that little butterfly feeling before I did something big. I would go 3, 2, 1 and just like off the lip, off the takeoff, whatever, 3, 2, 1. And hearing Ramsey and you to talk about the reset or kind of like switching your mindset like this, that's exactly what I was doing. I was just like taking whatever, like that butterfly feeling that I was having. I would go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, right? Like in succession. And it would just completely change my mindset. And it would take me out of that butterfly feeling and I'd be fine.
You know, I was following that's a great point. And one thing to take it to level 13 ninja status is you never want to ignore what you're feeling, because the reason that you have feelings is because they reinforce what it is that you're thinking about. So you are aware. You're not stepping through life, you know, as a zombie. You never want to avoid what you're feeling. You don't ever want to distract yourself, and you don't want to ignore. So you want to meet it, acknowledge it, and then be purposeful where you do not negotiate with what you're thinking about. You're telling your body and your mind what it's going to focus on, and you don't negotiate. And this is really important for, you know, activities like what you guys are talking about, mountain biking, motocross. You cannot negotiate with your mind. And when you do, what ends up happening is that your whole body becomes tense and you don't operate as optimally as possible. You know, recently I started to incorporate this to practice it, because some people go, well, how do you not negotiate with your mind? Like, I don't even understand how to do that. It's very simple exercise you can do. Is I got this from Ben Greenfield. He's a personal trainer. And he does this hot cold shower thing, and Tony Robbins does, you know, throwing himself into a freezing cold pool every morning to get started. There's physiological and biochemical effects and benefits to it, but the thing that is happening on a psychological level is that you train your mind to not feel, to not be fearful. You train your mind to not hold you up. You train your mind to say, when you say go, it goes. It doesn't sit there and think about it. You train your mind to do what you're telling it to do, not to have a European Union discussion about everything. So when you get into the shower, you turn the cold water on, you stand there and you take it, and you just disconnect your mind from your body. And his cycle that he recommends is 20 seconds of cold water, 10 seconds with warm water or hot water, and then you do that cycle 10 times. So it's a total evolution of 5 minutes. And by the time you get done with it, you just are like, what is this? It's not even a big deal anymore. But when you are thinking about it, the anticipation is where people, they don't even begin or pick up the sword. They don't even get on the bike. They don't even do this, is all the anticipation.
It's tough. And Bryce, you and I have talked about their contrast showers, is I guess what they're called. And I take them every day. So they have their, I mean, they have their benefits as far as like cold shock proteins and whatever
Heat
else.
shock.
Right. So it actually helps your blood flow and helps your muscles recover. But that's crazy. You could look at it that way too, because it is that mental battle. I mean, if you're in the wrong mindset and you hop into that shower and have to put that thing on all the way cold, it can really suck. But then there's days where you're in the zone and you're not or you're not overthinking it or whatever the case may be, and it's not that bad. And then there's days where Allie will be in the kitchen cooking dinner, and I just get done with a bike ride and I'm in the shower, and she can hear me yelling all the way from the shower because it's just too cold and I'm just having a miserable time in there.
And I did try that. I remember talking to you about it last year, and I definitely tried it. And this is kind of a good segue into my question for Ramsey is how many times should a general, like in all of your recommendations in developing a new habit or stepping outside your comfort zone and doing this kind of stuff, what's the general recommendation of how long you should stick with this kind of thing before you really start seeing or feeling a tangible difference? Do you have any like general recommendations for that from what you've seen from clients or what you've experienced yourself? Because like I said, I did try the hot cold shower thing, and I convinced myself at one point that it was helping me, and it probably was, but then it got to the point where it got inconvenient. It was like, what am I doing? I like to be warm in the shower, and then I stopped. So to making it stick is I think the biggest challenge.
That you just asked the $1 million question, and the here's the answer. You will do whatever it is that you must do. So in your mind, you got to move it out of the zone of this would be nice to have. Well, if I did this, I guess it would be okay. And you got to move it to the point where it is no longer an option for you. And another way of looking at this is, and everyone's different. I'm going to answer your question kind of in a contextual way. Everyone's different because everyone has different thresholds because they have different levels of consciousness. And one of the missions that I have this year, along with the owner Monica, is we got real clear on our business, and our business is to elevate the conscious awareness of humanity, especially in light of AI coming on board. So, side note, back to what you're asking, everyone has different conscious awareness. And so it may take longer for other people than it does for someone who can connect very quickly with what's happening in their body because they've conditioned themselves. So when you apply massive pain to something, and the pain could be threat of health, the pain could be threat of loss of face, losing a sponsorship. It could be losing a relationship. When you can apply with intensity some emotional consequence, it can happen in an instant. This change can happen in an instant where you just you will never go back to the old way of doing business. If you apply massive pleasure to the new behavior, it can happen in an instant. So the level of intensity of the emotional consequence is the key. It can happen in 1 second, or it can take 30 days because someone just kind of wants to they just kind of want to take a step forward, toe dip. And, AJ said something that is very revealing earlier at the onset of this conversation. And he said, last year, I made a full commitment. And I was going to do whatever it took. It was going to be, all hands on deck, find a hypnotist, be training, go get the track set up, get the start gate set up.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, boom, boom, boom. He was fully committed because it no longer was an option for him to let any time go by. And his emotional consequence is hearing the clock. And he was like, no, never. I will never go back to the way I was doing business. And so that's what you want to discover. And it's almost impossible for a person to find that about themselves, because that's the story that we tell ourselves. That's the lie that we tell ourselves that goes, well, do I really need this cold shower thing? Well, because that's what we do to ourselves.
Yep.
So you need somebody to point it out for you, and then to create that perspective or that strategy, and then attach it in some way, shape, or form, the pain or pleasure, to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And once that formula is figured out, man, people will go from zero to hero overnight. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, as much as it can in a limited conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours about this stuff.
Totally.
And
I teach a class for this, and it lasts from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 p.m. at night for 7 straight days, and they're totally exhausted by the end of
Yeah.
it.
And let me say too, like going into this, like hypnotism, when I hear the word or when I should say when I heard the word hypnotism this time 1 year ago, my mind would be like, oh, that's some woo-woo stuff. Like
You see a pocket watch dangled in front of somebody's face, right?
That is what I would envision in my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this stuff is real, and it's just altering it, like everything you just said. It's very real, and I wouldn't consider myself a impressionable or like a suggestible human being either. I trust me, I went into that first session questioning everything.
Mhm.
And after 1 hour with you, I was like, all right, this is the real deal. And I would say, in the 1 year since that time, I've really changed. And,
Yeah.
not just in motocross, whatever, because that's just motocross, but in every aspect of my life. And it just made me realize the importance. And I think I was always a positive person for sure. But it just makes you even more so realize the importance of every little thing and to practice it. And when things go wrong, trying it the first time, don't just give up on it, like you said, because I know people listening are probably thinking the same thing. You have that negative vision. I remember sitting down talking with you. We would talk about visualization. And I would say I can't visualize because when I do, I always visualize something going wrong. And
Mhm.
that's when you have to interrupt that, right? And then try again. No? Because I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
the crazy one or anyone else has this problem. Like if you said, AJ, go pretend you're sitting on the starting line, close your eyes, pretend you're sitting on the start line and start a race. And just, if I were to tell you what happens in my head, or if you were to go plug me into a computer and see what was going on in my head as I'm having this visualization, I would get the whole shot. I would make it a few turns and then I would blow it and everyone would go by me. This is the thought that actually goes through my head.
Mm-hmm. So you said something that was really important, and just to share with your listeners. One of the ways to view what's happening around you. Remember, NLP is the study of the systematic performance or systematic human performance. The interpretation we give of something not happening according to plan is that, one option is that we suck. The other option is, okay, what do I need to learn from this? Another option is, okay, how can I improve on the next heat? Another option is something else. You can just keep going through cascading on all these options, but
Right.
we focus on the thing that goes wrong, right? And if I could encourage people to view failure or fear of failure from a different perspective, and that is something very simple, and that's just to view it as whenever you sense fear coming on and a lack of certainty about the outcome, just know that you are in the exact right spot that you need to be at that moment. And that is the universe's way of telling you that you're about to grow from this experience. Because if you had it all suitcased and you had it all figured out, you're not growing at all from that experience. You're not getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you just from watching and studying motocross riders, after I started working with AJ, I dove into it head first, just to watch what they're doing, watch what they're focused on, observe how they approach the bike, observe how they're doing warm up. And every one of them experiences fear. And I think that's the dirty little secret that people don't want to acknowledge, that they experience fear. They want to seem impervious.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that you do right after you experience the fear is what separates the true champion from the bottom feeder. So in that moment that you experience fear, that's when you ask yourself, or you tell yourself, you know what? I'm exactly where I need to be right now. My little meter is starting to register. It's starting to flicker. The light's starting to come on. Yes, here it comes. I'm getting ready to have feedback. Let's do this. And I guarantee people will feel a lot different about the experience than what they're what interpretation they gave it before.
Can you talk a little bit about, because this is another thing that stuck with me too, talking about your thermostat, and you would always tell me how my thermostat was set too low. Can you explain what you would mean by that?
So the layman's terms are that a lot of times we have a fear of success. We have as much a fear of success. I know it sounds kind of strange to even say this, but we have as much a fear of success as we do a fear of failure. And what happens is, I got this idea because I was at Tony Robbins' seminar, and I want to give him credit because he's the one that shared this particular metaphor. But in the seminar, the discussion about fear of success came up. One of the audience members had something going on, and he basically said, look, you have your thermostat set at 72 degrees. And whenever this thermostat starts to climb, and in this case, it getting warmer is more success. Mm-hmm. Whenever it gets higher, you turn your air conditioner on to bring that temperature back. Whenever it gets higher and you start achieving more success and you start feeling a little bit more, spread thin, because you gotta stretch to take yourself to a new level, right? You got to learn new things. You got to push yourself harder. So whenever you feel that, we as humans, sometimes we begin to sabotage ourselves. And so our internal air conditioner kicks on to bring that temperature back, to go and say to ourselves, oh, no, you don't quite deserve this. Get back down here. And the funny thing is that sometimes when our performance starts to degrade and we're not doing as well as we should do, our HVAC kicks on, and then it heats the room back up to get it back to that, whatever that baseline temperature. And that baseline temperature is typically someone's self-esteem. Do they deserve to experience this? Do they deserve to win? Do they deserve failure? And so when we start to go into the success or the failure mode, we start getting into action because we just have our thermostat set at a different level. Our equilibrium, our default is at 72. And one of the questions, I don't think I asked it this eloquently, but I think one of the questions that I posed to you was something along the lines of, what's it going to take for you to set your thermostat higher so that you just start owning the fact that you deserve this?
Yeah, but the deeper you dig and the more you ask me the questions, the harder it is for me to deny that I do deserve it. And that's what
yes.
I found.
Well, what I find really interesting about this, in particular with you, AJ, and others in a similar situation, is an outside observer looking at a pro athlete would say, well, how could you not set the bar higher? You do better, you make more money. And I think what's really interesting at the root of all this is it's really not about the money. And I think a lot of people can't separate that when they're observing pro athletes. Is like, of course, why wouldn't you want to make more money? Of course, you have to go perform better. Why wouldn't you want to perform better? But it's a lot deeper than that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's where his values come into play. That's another exercise that we did.
It's tough. But then it will always boil down to you asking one of those very simple, obvious questions that, and Bryce, I mean, everyone does this to me. And then when they finally ask me that question, well, do you deserve it? Or do you and I think about it. I'm like, well, yeah, heck yeah, I deserve it. But so why?
But do you want it?
Do I want it? Yeah, I want it.
Because I think, and this isn't necessarily a criticism of you. This is just
right
in the flow of this conversation. What I observe is like a lot of people who have a lower set thermostat. With the more success often comes more responsibility, and how much are you checking yourself and checking your thermostat with the level of responsibility you want to burden yourself with, right? So like you get more success, you're gonna be your sponsors are going to expect more of you. The margin of error might be thinner. Your time might become more sparse for leisure activities. You're going to have to commit more to this, that, or the next thing. What are you willing to sacrifice in your free time, in your relationships? All those things kind of factor in. And it's
when you're on
it's
the
a
dirt
tough
bike itself, it comes into play as well. Like I found myself last year in that situation where even though I was 100 times more prepared than I've ever been in my life, I would be in a good spot on the bike and I would almost self-sabotage myself. So next thing you know, I'd end up right on the cusp of barely making a main event, just like where I've always been. And I'm like, man. And then if you want to look at it going into this year, I've put so much time and effort into my business and the academy, and I've let the riding go to the wayside more than I probably should have. Of course, I'm in really good shape right now, but it doesn't translate to seat time on the dirt bike. But I have this deep down belief that my thermostat is still set in the same place, and when I get to A1, I'm going to be right there in that same exact spot. And it's very weird for me to admit that, but I think it's true.
But at least you're self-aware about it, so we can make progress in your self-awareness.
Yeah, where
Yes,
this year
exactly.
that'll benefit because this year technically I'm more unprepared than the seat time wise than anybody that's going to line up on that gate. Which hopefully sponsors aren't listening to this. I have so many obligations. It's hard for me. It was very, very difficult for me this year to get as much seat time as I would have loved to do. But I know that when I line up, that isn't going to matter, and I'm going to elevate my game to be where I should be. And I'm doing air quotes right now, where I should be. And where I should be in my mind is making a main event. But my skill level says otherwise. And I think in last year especially, going all in, I bought my own supercross track. Ramsey, I was seeing you on a regular basis. I was working out like a freaking madman. I was on the bike 3-4 days a week. I was doing everything right. And it was very hard for me to change my where I should be from a 20th place guy to a 10th place guy to what it should have been. And it ended up being impossible for me to do.
Yeah, you remember? Okay, so there was I remember some of the things that we were working on with a little bit more fidelity now, and they were related to that. They were related to that very topic, and they were related to the sound. It was the sound, the input, the sensory input for you was the sound. So when you were out front and you heard something very specific, it made you adjust your thermostat. And it depends on how many people were either behind you or in front of you, depending upon how you reacted. And one of because a lot of this stuff is really important to hear it many different ways and from different perspectives, because everyone processes things differently and at different times and has different awareness. He is at a different place mentally than he was last year. So he's ready to absorb different information this year. So this is like the optimal mindset, the highest level of conscious awareness is a lifelong journey. It's not it's not like you have a pill and you're there. Mm-hmm. It's tuning yourself over and over and over and over and over again to the point where that non-negotiation happens. And even though you're saying a lot of things are different versus last year, one thing that is very different is your mindset is in a totally different place.
Light years ahead of where
it was last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Ramsey, we really appreciate your time. I know you have another obligation, but I do want to ask one final question, if you wouldn't mind. And that is I personally believe that our healthcare system is too reliant on medications and the prescribing of chemical compounds to alter people's mental state, when clearly there's other options. And from your professional standpoint, do you or would you like to see a more conscientious steering of patients from practicing physicians towards an option like hypnosis for the, not, as you mentioned, you're not addressing severe mental illness, but I mean, I see an application in what you do to a lot of like anxiety, things that are often just, here's a drug, see you later. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think traditional medicine has its place for when things have come off the bus. And this is a really this is a great question, and I could spend probably about a week answering it. The real I guess if I could snap my finger and create an ideal scenario, I think the vast majority of us, and I'm an example of this. The story I told you in the very beginning, I'm an example of that. I was stuck. And here's a person that people look at and go, man, he's got his act together. No, I was stuck. And I feel stronger sharing that with people because I know other people are stuck. And we don't have all the answers. And I think what's really helpful and what is going to benefit people more is just helping them to learn how to think, how to learn how to reframe something. Instead we grow up and we're told, don't do this, stop doing that, sit down. And everything we see on the news is terrible. And, we're constantly in this state of overstimulation, whether it's social media or whatever it is. And whenever we do hear stuff, you can't even tell if it's the truth or not. And that's why we have so much independent news sources nowadays, because you can't even rely on mainstream media anymore.
Right.
And so everyone is constantly, their focus is on what is wrong. And by the way, the diagnostics manual for mental health disorders is all focused on what's wrong. Here's this label I'm going to put on you. Most of us, I'd say probably about 70, 80% of us just need help coming up with a different perspective. How many times you sit with a friend and they like what you do with AJ? Hey man, have you ever thought about doing this? And he goes, no, actually I haven't. There's a different feeling that is associated with that thought. And the vast majority of us just need help with that. We don't need to be medicated. We don't need to be, and again, I don't know, because I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't prescribe medication. I'm not a licensed clinical social worker or psychotherapist. But I do know that I see people who come in here and they're very frustrated. And a lot of clients that we see that are on the helping them out of suffering states kind of perspective, a lot of them are very frustrated and they come to us as a last resort. And they leave here and they go, man, I never knew this. I didn't realize this. I really appreciate the fact that you helped me. You gave me strategies. You didn't just let me talk on and on and on about what's wrong.
Right.
You actually helped me feel differently.
Yeah, there's something to be said with the way that you, even just the tone of your voice, I don't know. I felt so at ease being there. Like I was excited. I get off the plane on the way back from the race, and I was excited to go and see you. You're very, you're very good at like getting that information across. And you're right. Like as soon as I'd start to go on a little negative rant, you'd stop me in my tracks and tell me why it was happening and how it should be fixed. I would really suggest, and like I said, I'm a positive person, generally speaking. I would highly suggest that anyone seek to improve just the little part of their game. And like you said, it's a lifelong journey. You can always improve just a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
Ramsey, sorry, I was just going to use that as an opportunity to let you tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can find you.
Oh, yeah, cool. So the best way to do it is a lot of people, the realm of hypnosis is kind of, we still do quite a bit of education because people have, their Hollywood version imprinted in their mind. And the best way to do it is you get a lot of value and a lot of content on our website. It's peakperformanceassociates.com. peakperformanceassociates.com, and Peak Performance Associates is all one word. just like it sounds.com. And you'll see the other teammates that we have there. I'm actually the lead trainer, so I teach this. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because I teach it. I teach NLP, I teach hypnosis, and really the next dimension, and back to that mission, is just people elevating their conscious awareness, because when that happens, you'll see the benefit and you'll see the beauty and the like true connection that you can have with other people, even if it's your opponent, even if it's your racing competitor. You're standing next to them, you just look at them, give them a head nod. Hey, I acknowledge your presence, and I am going to bring my A game. And it's not you're not out there to cut one another under by taking out their knees. You're there because you respect that person. That person respects you and your presence. And when you move into that state, you're actually in your strongest version. That's when you will go through a brick wall, and you'll do it with a smile on your face. And so, I encourage anybody that wants to learn about hypnosis or learn more information, check out our website. You can give us a call. Usually we're really involved with clients. Our phone number is on our website. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. This is the wave of the future. Learning how to direct your thoughts we are on the cusp of something pretty awesome happening. And where skills like chiropractic medicine, like acupuncture were, 10, 20 years ago, that's where we are right now. So people that are interested in this field and learning more about it, this is an amazing opportunity. And this is a perfect time, because pretty soon, instead of taking your kid to get him medicated, or feeling sad about something and being medicated, they're going to go, hey, let's go see Ramsey.
Heck yeah.
Or better yet, you mentioned AI. We'll just plug into Neuralink, and Elon Musk will have us all connected, and you could just give me a session directed to my brain from my computer or something.
There you go.
Well, Ramsey, we really, really appreciate it. I mean, this has just been like a 30,000-foot view of what you do and how it can benefit everybody, and especially athletes and people like AJ. But we very much value your time and are very appreciative of you doing this, taking the time to do this with us. So we hope to have you on again if your schedule and time allows, and if you'd be willing, because this is something that it is extremely interesting, has a lot of practical benefit, and is just super cool.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And again, it's an honor to be able to share this. I appreciate your time, and AJ, man, I'm so excited for you for 2019. It's your first race coming up pretty weekend. Soon, and I already bought my tickets for Houston Stadium, or whatever it's called now, Texas Stadium. So I'll see you there.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Ramsey. We appreciate it.
Yeah, take care. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Again, Ramsey Ayachi, awesome guy. We'll definitely be having him back on. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. Again, Rack Racing, rackracing.com, The Collective Experience. Check them out at thecollectivexp.com. And last but not least, On the Gas Motorsports. And you can check them out at onthegasmotorsports.com. Our next podcast is going to be, I think, in a couple days. We're going to do a preview of the Supercross season, right, Bryce?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'd also like to thank Ramsey himself. So again, thank you very much, Ramsey, for taking time out of your day to chat with us, and we look forward to having you back. And I don't think we ever intended on doing like Jay with the mental game and Ramsey back to back, but it's kind of cool how that worked out. So if anybody's going through our episodes and hear both of those, concurrently, I think there's a lot there. There's definitely a lot there for benefit for
it's
the mental side of things.
It's almost like Jay and ourselves are the everyday examples of almost like the layman, like especially myself and you would be the layman's terms of what this stuff is. And then Ramsey is the science behind it, right? And he can explain exactly why certain things are the way they are, which for me, I'm somebody that really likes to understand why it's happening. You could teach me something all day long, but if I don't understand the why, I'm either skeptical or just not really interested in it.
Yeah. And I think the long form conversation is awesome too, because there's only so much you can get out of just hearing it for a minute or two, or getting a snippet on the Google or something like that. Like, to really be able to sit down and have a conversation about it, it really helps kind of absorb. So thank you again, Ramsey. Thank you everybody for listening. Look forward to our next episode, which is going to be the Supercross preview. And we're really excited for the season, and we thank you again.
Toodaloo.
Adios.